Hello and welcome to the Test Community Network. My name's Tim Burnett. I hope you're all safe and well. This week we're talking about user experience. We have Anna Kate Phelan and we have Richard London, and they're both going to kind of give us an insight into their presentation that gave at the European Association of Test Publishers Conference last year in Dublin. Now, this was actually recorded. When was it? It was recorded about November time, I think, last year. But we just had such a stacked series of recordings to put out. I've just not been able to get around to it. So Richard and Anna have been absolutely brilliantly patient in waiting for this episode to come out. And it is a really, really cracking episode because the room was crammed. I couldn't get in there. I was in another session that essentially got cancelled. I was late getting to this one, and there was just no room for me at all in there to be safely in there because it was just so many people so interested in this particular topic. Now, it is a very important topic because we want the experience for the candidates to be as seamless as possible. So Anna and Richard kind of explain their approach and thinking around how they designed assessment platforms. Now, we're going to, just before we get into that, go to my new t-shirt, this one, Gen AI. There you go. It's a nice little t-shirt, isn't it? Right, I'm going to launch up. I want to show you a couple of things before we start today. So, some big things going on at the moment. In terms of what's popular on the network at the moment, the RM guide that's been put out about cheating, that's been a really popular one. And of course, there's been a lot of talk and chatter about the ACCA's move away from online proctoring next year. Quite a big move, really, in some ways, but it's signaling signals that have really been going on for some time. And I think even at the Dublin conference last year, I was talking to some very similar organizations in that space. And they were, I wouldn't say they were thinking about moving away, but they had serious concerns about the cheating aspect. And AI is a big kind of part of that process. Other events we've got coming up. So assessment systems, they've got novel item types. That's worth watching that. We have Flip Plus. This is the European version of the assessment organization. They're looking at AI in item development. Comparative judgment webinar coming up. I think that's from the No More Marking people. Just gives you insight there. Surpass have got item creation to results webinar. Just giving you a bit of a tour of the platform, I believe that is. Bet UK, of course. Are you going to bet? I'm not going to bet. I have to pay now because I'm not teaching anymore, so I can't get through that kind of loophole. But it's okay, bet. It's a lot going on, and I think for education space they're like a lot, but for the assessment space, there's just not enough really there to draw me. I am going to go to the Next Gen assessment event in February, so that's in London. So I think it's the 24th. It'll be on the events calendar here, but that's one worth looking at. Other ones, ATP coffee chat coming up, and I think there's another ATP event coming over as well. And then we've got Midwise Conference, some other events going on there. Big chatter news as well. We've got Ofqual have published their Principles of AI Marketing document that's come out. So this is where they did a webinar for a load of AOs last year, and I was very lucky enough to attend that, and they talked us through their research, put together everything that they've been thinking around the use of AI. And effectively it comes down to the use of generative AI is not compliant with the conditions of regulation. Now, there are lots of different kind of scales of AI. So if you're using supervised learning, pre-trained models, that kind of thing, then you stand a better chance of meeting their kind of regulatory requirements for that. But the big thing about using generative AI is just the lack of explainability in that. And they kind of talk through that a little bit in terms of the deep neural networks, and even the fact that Claude and Anthropic and the people like that, Gemini, they can't really trace why things are kind of predicted and said within the deep neural network of the large language model. So that's one of the kind of underlying reasons why that is the case. So it's worth checking that out. Lots of other interesting articles coming on there as well. The other one I just want to, if you are an ATP member, they've just put out a human oversight of AI in assessment considerations for responsible use document. So if you're an ATP member, and I'll just remind you of how this works. If your organization is a member of ATP, then you can be a member for free, and therefore you can get this document come through. It's for members only, so you do need to be a member. But if you go to their website, sign up through with your organizational email, they'll just double check that it's the correct email, and then you'll be able to access this document there as well. And the guys that it's one of the committees that put this together. It's just having a quick skim through before. It's literally just come into my inbox. It's well worth reading that through. Anyway, right, on to my interview now. I'm going to go into interview conversation with Anna and Richard about user experience. So over to Anna and Richard. Anna, thanks for joining me. Are you well?
Hi, very well. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So, for anyone who doesn't know you and your role and what you do, Rich, do you want to go first? Do you want to tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do and where you work?
Yeah, I'm Rich London. I'm the senior UX at Prometric. I've been here for 5 years. Before that, I was working at Support.
Yes, yeah, we used to work together at Surpass, didn't we? So back in the days. Anna, do you want to tell us a bit more about yourself?
My name's Anna Phelan. I'm head of product at Eintech. We provide the e-assessment platform Rogo. I'm also on the board of the e-assessment association, so I know you from that, Tim. And here I am today.
Excellent, yeah. And anyone who watches the broadcasts, Anna was interviewed at the ATP conference, where kind of this conversation is born from, really. So we're going to be talking about UX research and user experience, and just kind of exploring that and its role within the assessment space. Rich, do you want to give us kind of a quick introduction to what UX research is, just for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, so I guess the term UX is used to describe UX and UI. So there's two parts to it, but mainly UX research for me is around discovery. So finding out how people are using systems and software, how they work on a daily basis. That could be systems that they're using outside of maybe a product that you're particularly designing for. What their daily tasks are. And a term that I use quite a lot is pain points. So understanding what their pain points are. So that could be within a particular system that you're using, but also how maybe the software that you're working on or designing for, how that can kind of streamline their processes. So the research entails, maybe competitors, looking at what they're doing, mapping out information architecture, so flows, etc., wireframes and prototypes, and testing those with people. So finding people that you can kind of test your concepts out with.
UI bit, you mentioned UI, that's the user interface kind of part of it, isn't it? And I suppose the ultimate aim really with exams on screen particularly, and any media, is that the delivery shouldn't change the ability of the candidate to respond, should it?
No, I mean, for me, it's kind of that layer should be almost invisible. That, for me, the content is the key here. The items themselves, and so streamlining that and making sure that there's kind of trying to reduce that anxiety, because exams and tests are anxiety inducing, aren't they? So trying to reduce that.
Yeah, create a stress-free environment for people to start their skills. So, Anna, how does it, the kind of UX research fit within, I suppose, the mission of your company? What, with Eintech, how does it, how do you embody UX as part of your work?
It's absolutely key. And I suppose it starts from the very inception of the company. So our founder actually worked in an awarding organization in the IT department, and found various pain points from the exams team there with their software that they were using, and then decided to essentially make his own software based off that interaction. So from the very beginning, we've had a consideration towards user experience. When it comes to how we embed it in the company day to day, regular interviews with our users, regular touch points with our users, and we have put together what we call personas, which are an artifact that you can use in user experience research. They're essentially archetypal users that you can point to, and you can give them a name. So you can say Jenny, Paul, that sort of thing. And when my team are designing flows and putting together new functionality, we think each time, how would Jenny interact with this? What would Paul think about this? Really make sure that we're having that human-centered approach within the design. And then at a higher level, it's all about the analytics. So the more quantitative data that we can get that might indicate if there's areas for improvement, or if there is some areas for success. Just really looking at your usual kind of psychometric data, but also having considerations towards things like no-show rate, fill rate, that sort of thing. How long is a break in a test? Who's taking the practice test, and what is the volume of test taking when it comes to those practice tests? So those sort of aspects are just day to day, how we look at the product, how we improve the product. It's very user centered. If you don't begin from the user when you're building a product, you can essentially build a product for nobody. So you need to make sure that you're building it for the right people and a wide subset of people, and also just making sure that it's intuitive, easy to use. So the Rogo is designed for children to adults essentially. So just making sure that it's as simple as possible, that it feels as simple as using a paper test, that it's better than using a paper test. It shouldn't feel like a barrier. It should feel like an enabler, and that's what we really try to make sure happens at Eintech.
And so it's quite a holistic kind of view there. Would you agree then with yourself, Rich, as well, in terms of Prometric's approach to UX and its kind of mission?
Yeah, I think we do quite a lot of discovery. So there's quite a number of people that we have access to internally who are using the systems to provide then a service. And so, for me, it's about trying to understand what that is. I don't deal with a lot of people on a daily basis, who are interacting with the systems that we're designing. But kind of mapping that out. So even before doing any kind of design work, we're now using whiteboarding tools like Miro to map out what things look like now, the screens that people are interacting with, but also trying to understand what their processes are. So we have operating procedures for certain processes, and understanding how the products that I've been working on, how they fit into that. And also, if there's any new things, how does that, fit nicely with and not disrupt too much that kind of process? Because there's SLAs and things that we have to, kind of adhere to, and just things as well like we have customer support people where candidates ring in with issues, and thinking about metrics. So some of the stuff that Anna was mentioning there. The metrics around number of calls and things. How can we design something that potentially maybe reduces the number of calls from candidates? And that could be help articles or more intuitive kind of check-in processes. Those types of things. But certainly, discovery for me is a piece where I tend to let people just talk. It's like I literally don't know anything about, your role and what you're doing. And so, asking open-ended questions, getting them to talk, record the session, and then, using Miro to kind of document what we've found out and having that kind of central repository. So, Anna, you mentioned personas, but we're trying to get to a place where we have central repos of discovery, artifacts, etc., where people can dip in and go, right, this is everything that has been kind of discovered in this particular process, for example. But it's kind of getting a more detailed into really understanding the systems that these other teams that we don't interact with, what they're dealing with on a daily.
I suppose there's a risk, isn't there? You can make an assumption. When you design a product, you think, oh, this is how it's going to work. This is my imagination as to how it's going to interact. And you talked, Anna, and both of you about kind of the analytics side of things and using, I suppose, a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data, aren't you? Really, observational data and mapping. And there's some great techniques you can use. Just for anyone who doesn't know what Miro is, Miro. Potato. Can you just explain what that is, Rich? Just so people.
So it's just a whiteboard where you can map out. There's just like in Teams has it as well. They're all much of a muchness really, but it's a place where you can get people in and you can just kind of document. So there's sticky notes and things that you can use, which are like post-it notes, digital versions of. But I use it to try and map out user flows. And so I'm kind of using it to, kind of show screens, what interactions, the users are performing, what the interactions the system is performing, data displayed, all of those types of things. But then from a flow mapping perspective, it's kind of showing all of the activity that happens, within a particular multi-step flow. So from, for example, a candidate checking into a centre, you know, all of the things, who are they interacting with? What are the systems that the test centre people are interacting, you know, using, etc. What's on, and all of those types of kind of artifacts that we want to understand. You know, where does that data go? Where does it live?
Yeah.
What happens, etc., etc.
Yeah, and you both kind of explore this topic in a joint presentation, joint session at the EATP conference, didn't you? Anna, what was the kind of the reaction from the audience? What did you share with the audience? What did you take them through? What did they kind of respond back on there? What was their observations or your observations?
So on what we shared, so we went through some UX principles. We went through universal design principles, which you can apply to any sort of design, and talked about how you could apply them to your assessment program. We talked about vision and mission and how you might actually be able to put that into your assessment program. So we talked about a company's mission previously, but when you think about an assessment program's mission, it might help your team really kind of focus on where you want to go, essentially. So you have a vision, which is like a lofty goal. It can be very overarching and broad. And actually, I have some examples from some consumer products that might kind of entrench this. So Zoom's very lofty mission is to make work life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive.
Right.
Or actually, sorry, that was Slack, in case anybody catches me on that. And then Zoom was even loftier, and I think a lot more difficult, actually, to make video communication frictionless. A tough one. And then Shopify to make commerce better for everyone. So you can have a really lofty kind of vision and think about your kind of North Star. Where would you want to go? Basically, you could say, I want to take over the world kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when it comes to your mission, that's really outlining the scope and the approach and the users. And you could use that in your day-to-day or for the year. What's your mission for, like, what is achievable realistically in that year? Product missions are a lot harder to come by from companies, because usually it's they give a mission to a subdivision or a product, and the vision is higher. But often they're interchangeable when people are talking about them. They're talking about vision and mission. But if we think about a product mission for Google search, which is something that we all use every day, it could be to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So that talks about the target user, everyone, the key benefit, access to organized information, and the unique differentiation. So universal accessibility and usefulness. So really kind of having a think about what is the scope and the approach of your assessment program is useful. And what's very key in that is that user experience. Who are your users? You want to validate your assumptions. So you mentioned previously about assumptions, and it's a huge tenet in user experience and design and product management, to make sure that you're actually getting data on what you're assuming. You might assume, people, nobody wants to move to a computer to do their exam. They want to keep on paper. You might have conversations with them and find that they're actually very different. Your assumptions come from your own biases.
Yeah.
So very important to make sure that you put a structured approach into this sort of thing, or you could end up building an assessment flow or a product for nobody, which is essentially what you don't want to do.
Hi, sorry, I just want to interrupt you for a second. This is a fascinating conversation with Anna and Rich, but I just want to tell you very quickly about something I'm working on. So you may remember last year, back in 2025, think back all that way, I put together edition 1 of the AI Adoption Playbook for awarding organizations. This is an enormous document with 37 plays and expert opinions, all kind of guiding you through the latest ideas and thinking about how you can use AI within your organization. Well, guess what? Things have moved on a little bit. Some of it needs tweaking because we've got new ideas, new thinking, new technologies come along. So what I want you to do is I want you to follow this QR code, which is just above me, and I want you to go to the LinkedIn post that is attached to that and give me your thoughts and your feelings as to what has changed over this last kind of 6 months since I've released this first version. Have a chat. Let us know your comments. I want to make sure that edition 2 is doing exactly what I need it to do for you. Anyway, back to Richard and Anna. it was a packed room. I couldn't get in. I wanted to join you, but I couldn't do that. Were there any kind of interesting questions that were raised during the session?
Yeah, definitely. So a lady came up at the end and was asking us questions on how to embed thinking towards accessibility in her organization, and kind of how to overcome barriers in that regard. Because oftentimes, historically, accessibility has been seen by some organizations as a bit of an afterthought, because using kind of commercially minded thinking, one may go, okay, well, this is a very small subset of users. I'm going to design to the widest level of users. However, that's very short-sighted. So first off, there's legislation concerns when it comes to legal aspects, but also if you design inclusively, you might find that you design for more people than people with protected characteristics or disabilities. Um, in essence, if you provide things like, let's say, a screen reading functionality, or ways to interact with the system more easily, color contrast, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There are people that don't have diagnosed disabilities or conditions that will be far more engaged with that software if you provide that. You may not realize that, but there's so many people. And when you think about aspects like closed captions and subtitles, so originally implemented for people that were hard of hearing or deaf.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you think about how many people in your day to day, when you have your telly on now, how many people in your family are using those subtitles, and
Yeah.
how much more are they engaged in the content because of that? So you
Yeah.
can apply those things
Yeah.
to product management, accessibility, and even your assessment.
Well, you mentioned, I think that's a super important example. I think when you're talking about kind of missions and visions and personas and things, do you think people? I've never seen in a tender that comes from an awarding organisation, any kind of information about persona evidence. It's a spec, isn't it? It's kind of, they just lay out the kind of fit. Do you think life would be infinitely easier for everyone if they came forward with that mission and the kind of persona information? Do you think that would be useful?
Definitely, and it kind of it will be super useful, but also it kind of highlights that something to make sure for everybody that is happening is, okay, let's say you get through a tender process, you have a partner, or even in those conversations, even in some sort of competitive dialogue, you want to make sure that your assessment provider understands who your market is. This is a
Yeah.
key partnership for you.
Yeah.
They need to know who your users are, who's going to be using the system, and they need to be confident that they can, provide for your users. It's not as simple as, I'm providing some software, it is a testing software. This is such a key partnership for an awarding organization. So really the sorts of questions that you need to be asking are, okay, from our conversations, what's your perception of who the target users are? Or you should be looking at them to ask you those questions so they can validate their own assumptions, thus proving that they actually have the essential product management acumen and design acumen to give you a full, holistic, valuable service. So if those interactions aren't happening, and if it's just a tick box and it's just, okay, that's done, then that's the point where maybe you need to kind of dig a little deeper to make sure you have the right fit, somebody that can design a program with you and really
Yeah.
think step by step with you on how best to serve your users. Because essentially, my users are my clients' users. So I
Yeah.
have two kind of main user groups. I have the client and keeping them happy. So the commissioner, and then the people that are interacting with the system, the admin users, the SMEs and markers that come in and out. And then realistically, Richard, earlier you talked about how content is king, which it is. But another kind of maybe queen, or it's sort of thing, is candidate.
Yeah.
Candidate is, what are we, who is paying for these services, who is
Yeah.
engaging in these services. If they go, the whole ecosystem goes down with it. So it's just making sure that they feel appropriately supported, and your assessment provider should be doing that.
Yeah.
I think the personas, there's more end users of those, I think, than people realize, because it's context, isn't it? I speak to developers a lot, and they crave context. They crave, understanding how these systems are going to get used. And, I think certainly personas is one of those tools in the toolkit that we can, leverage to help them understand. So yeah, there's a lot of different people who would consume the content from them.
And they're like a validation tool, aren't they? Because at every stage of the journey, like you say, that's disseminated out to the development team. Because otherwise, they're going to be developing stuff with their assumptions. They're going to be following the spec, aren't they? And they can't kind of test against them. And the specs are good that are given to them, but they're not going to have the holistic details to the context in which this is going to be used and the challenges someone may face. It's something I always kind of, when my teaching the marketing stuff, I always say, start with, you need to understand the audience. You need to focus on the audience. You need to have those personas. I think there's this interesting space that we're going to it where there's a potential that we're going to have a broader spectrum, or the ability to have a broader spectrum of personas, because you typically probably have about 3 or 4, wouldn't you, that you work to within a space. But I wonder, with AI and stuff like that, there's potential for growth there, but it just gets too complicated if you have too many, I think. So finally, just I suppose last question, just to you, Rich, because your kind of experience from the US and UK side, or European side, are you noticing any differences in kind of attitudes towards UX across the big pond?
No, I think that it's still relevant. All of the things that we are trying to do regarding discovery, it is still relevant. It's just, I think there's more people that I need to talk to. There's more within the flows and things. There's more people that I have to kind of understand, and each person plays a slightly different. They contribute to that particular flow in a maybe in a unique way. So it's not necessarily that it's much different on the daily for me, but it's certainly just coming back to some of the things that Anna was talking about, just that the numbers are that there's more candidates. So something that would have maybe affected a small number of candidates now, because there's more people taking tests. The numbers are larger, so that, like we was talking about metrics and things like that around candidate calls and things like that. Certainly, those numbers, if a candidate is affected by something, then that can look worse. So it's certainly really coming down to the discovery part of things. And certainly when you touched on AI, I think the research now is becoming more and more important. My role is changing in that I have to do more of that. To try and work out that full scope.
Yeah, and the pace is picking up as well, isn't it? And I was mentioning earlier, even with the platform recording now, the features that are coming out on a daily basis, it's keeping pace with that. And especially if you're doing an assessment program off the back of it, I think it's been great. I think we've kind of, I suppose, explored the subject. We've explored the overall topic and the importance of it as part of the process. And I'm certain there's plenty to take away from that. I suppose one last tip from both of you in terms of what would be your recommendation to anyone approaching an assessment program in relation to user experience? What advice, one last piece of advice, would you give to someone about how they should think about UX in this world? Maybe Anna, if you kind of throw your kind of thought first.
I suppose it's making sure that they have the appropriate kind of approach when it comes to caring and understanding about your users from the beginning of the journey to the end of the journey. And it's interesting that we were speaking about context and validating assumptions. It's important that there is a very kind of extensive discovery process, because each organization is different and it's not one size fits all. On giving context to developers, an old boss of mine gave me a great example of this at the beginning of my career. I was talking about, okay, you know, let's say you give, you know, a picture of a car, a very detailed picture of a car to development team, and you think, okay, well, Bob's your uncle there, they have that, they're going to come with this car.
Yep.
They drive it up, you get in the car, you put the key in the engine and it doesn't start. Like, why is it not starting? You get out of the car, then you open up the hood and discover there's no engine in there, because they didn't get the context that you wanted it to drive anywhere, or that you hadn't fully explained. You gave a picture, but you missed out on the detail, the context, and the purpose of what you were trying to achieve. And it's just about making sure that you keep that the organization you're dealing with has the ability to look at things in very micro and then the macro, so looking at overall the experience. But just making sure that they really can get into the nuts and bolts of your test engine type thing.
Excellent. Rich? Yeah, no, it's great. I think it's a great example of that. Rich, any last takeaways?
I think it's more around the you know, how can the systems reduce that candidate anxiety? What things can you put in place? Is that due to, you know, around practice tests, etc.? But certainly, you know, the universal design principles, all of those types of things. How can you reduce that anxiety and that kind of cognitive load with a candidate to try and help them, you know, flow through their test with ease?
Excellent. Well, great advice there. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate that. And I'm sure there'll be more questions will be asked as we go through. It'd be great to see more presentations about user experience at the conferences. I think it'd be almost amazing if we could come up with a universal design for an assessment interface. That would be the dream. So every candidate could sit down. That would be quite fun, wouldn't it? But maybe we're a bit of a way off that just yet. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, thank you very much. Where have I gone? I'm here. There I am. I am here. Thank you very much. That was excellent. I really did enjoy that, and it's really well worth waiting for that. And it's been one that I've just wanted to get out as soon as possible. I just love the ideas that they put forward, and just that thinking really about the fact that the candidate comes first in all this. And it always goes back to, I remember, I think it was at the same conference actually, Dr. Mary Richardson said, when you're looking at those graphs and you're seeing those dots on there in terms of results of students across an entire cohort, each one of those is an individual, and they all have their own experiences and anxieties and stress, and their time before the test, during the test, and after the test, and everything that's going on in their lives is so important. So if we could just do some more consideration as to how we lay these things out to make them as smooth as possible for them, just intuitive for them and their world and their work, to give them the best possible chance of success. So that's me off my little high horse there. Well, thank you very much, Richard and Anna, and we'll be back next week. We've got a really, really interesting interview coming up. I'm hoping it's going to be an interview with Dean from NCFE, talking about some of the amazing projects that they've been doing for that. So all being well, that'll be the one for next week, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.